We've learned a lot over the past few weeks about the suitability, the scalability, and the sustainability elements of evaluation. Now, how do we put these pieces together, and do we even need to? You may remember from the beginning that the original idea behind the site evaluation was to combine all three S's, suitability, scalability, and sustainability, into one comprehensive evaluation. This was our original idea. But after working in the field over several years, we've realized that this is not necessarily the best approach to evaluation. Combining results is difficult, and it may not make sense. It's almost impossible to capture all of the learning that we achieve in evaluation through one integrated score chart or comprehensive evaluation. That's true for three reasons. First, consider the differences in the units of analysis between each of the three S's. Suitability is mainly looking at a product and the direct inputs it needs to function as a product. Scalability primarily looks at the supply chain as the unit of analysis. And finally, sustainability may look at an organization or its business model as its key unit of analysis. Now, the second reason why creating a comprehensive evaluation is so difficult is because each of these three S's, in addition to having different units of analysis, also come from different academic disciplines, or you might call those different methodological paradigms. For example, suitability comes mainly from the field of mechanical engineering and incorporates design of experiments into its particular methodology. In the case of scalability, we look at all sorts of different ideas, including the supply chain, management science, and behavioral operations in trying to understand that particular dimension of a product. And finally, sustainability is centered on user research or understanding socio-technical systems. These are many different scales, and trying to combine them into one comprehensive evaluation is extremely difficult. Finally, I would suggest that building something into one particular score chart or one comprehensive evaluation may unintentionally reduce the results to only those results that are quantifiable. But quantifiable results aren't necessarily our most important learnings from the evaluation. Take, for example, our solar lantern evaluation, in which we learned that having a cell phone charger that was attached to the solar lantern was in fact more important to the end user of the product than was the actual capability to charge the lantern. Now, that's something that we can't boil down to a single number. So we have to keep in mind that these three elements of what makes it difficult to combine all three S's are actually helping us get to more interesting and greater learnings from our evaluation. So given the difficulty of combining them, we've often at Scite taken a pragmatic approach to product evaluation, in which we consider in detail the audience that will use those particular findings and the context in which the findings of the evaluation will be used in order to determine which parts of the evaluation, whether from the suitability, the scalability, or the sustainability element, or even elements from all three particular vectors of the site evaluation, will be reported and used.
So you've conducted your technology evaluation. You have a lot of data, you have some really interesting findings that you'd like to draw out, but you have to bring it all together into sort of a final document, if you will, to present to your audience. One of the key things that we start with here at Scite is defining that audience. And we find that this is a really critical stage of the evaluation that should be done at the beginning and sort of throughout the process, but you may find that you want to do sort of a recalibration as you bring the pieces together. And so you might think about defining that audience in a few different ways. For us, it has evolved in different ways, and I'm going to explain a couple of those. So one way that that audience might become clear is through the research question itself. So we've worked with partners to do technology evaluations where the research question really drives who our audience is. We're trying to answer that research question in tandem with that partner. One example of this is SITE's technology evaluation with the Malaria Consortium. The Malaria Consortium felt that they had a really good understanding of the devices that were available to them, malaria rapid diagnostic test devices, and how those devices worked. What they didn't have a good understanding of was sort of the scalability aspect of those devices. They had found that private sector actors were not thrilled to be stocking these devices in their clinics and wanted to find out why that was and what they could do in order to incentivize private sector actors to stock malaria rapid diagnostic tests. And so our evaluation and the resulting report was really driven toward meeting the needs of that audience, the Malaria Consortium, and helping them understand our findings in a way that they could act upon those findings. So that's sort of, thinking about your audience in terms of a research question. Another way that you can think about your audience is in terms of a research finding. So this is a case in which you may recalibrate at the end of an evaluation with an interesting finding and try to meet an audience that might be able to act on that finding. And for SITE, one example of this was in our water filter evaluation in Ahmedabad, India. One of the findings here was that there were a tremendous amount of low-cost water filters available on the local market, but that those water filters weren't actually doing their job. They weren't filtering the water effectively. On the other side of the spectrum, you had high-cost filters that weren't accessible or affordable for lower-income families. And so SITE found that there was really a gap in the market. And this was an interesting finding to us because it suggested that there was room for innovation, there was room for market growth and to sort of tap into a new kind of technology here. And because of that, our final report focused on meeting the needs of a couple of different audiences, but in particular reaching product designers. And we actually were able to reach a product designer who read the report and was interested in this gap and is now designing and developing a new type of water filter that he believes can sort of meet this need. So for us, that was a really great outcome. And that's another way that you may think about the audience or the target of your report. So I'm going to give you just a few quick tips for how to bring your report together into a final deliverable. How do we bring all of those pieces together? So the first tip is to keep it brief and concise. If possible, think about various formats, whether it's going to be digital or delivered in person. We recommend keeping something to 1 to 5 pages. You can always dig deeper if you need to later. The second thing to keep in mind is quantifying your results in comparative charts if you're able to. So we've talked a lot about the different ways that we can put together comparative charts to compare technologies across families and enable that decision maker, your audience, to really get in there and understand the differences in those technologies. Another thing to keep in mind is to draw out those surprising, counterintuitive findings. In one example, a SITE researcher found that while reverse osmosis water filter systems at a systems level were actually very efficient in their use of water, at a household level they were very inefficient, wasting a lot of water that could have been reused, particularly in India, which is a water scarce region. This was something that we wanted to make sure to draw out so that water experts who were reading the report would sort of get that finding, something that they wouldn't normally expect. So draw those out into the beginning. Another thing to consider is that you have a lot of data on your hands. Choosing what comes first, second, third is going to be difficult. If you have things that you want to dig a little bit deeper into, that's okay. Pull those out into a side format or a side deliverable where you can really develop those ideas and keep the main report full of key findings. And finally, if possible, make your end deliverable action-oriented. Help your audience make the decision confidently at the end of the day, knowing that data is behind the decision that they're making.